fabric first or pattern first? Every sewist has to come across this problem and ask themselves that question. And honestly, depending on which you start with, can have a big impact on how your garment turns out. Sometimes your pattern is yelling the loudest at you, saying, "Make me, make me." And other times the fabric is yelling even louder, saying, "Make me, make me." And we're left debating which is yelling the loudest. In this video, I'll walk you through both approaches so that you can find success no matter which one you start with, and really find your own style in navigating. Do you pick the pattern first or the fabric? And let's get good results with either one. Welcome back, sewing friends. It is delightful to have you here and see all your smiling faces again. We are back with another good topic today. Starting with, do you find a pattern first and find fabric to match, or do you have fabric first and find a pattern to match? The pros and the cons, and all the little juicy bits of info to help you decide that you realize there is no one right way. You can absolutely do both. And I'm going to talk you through scenarios of both so that you're more aware of things to put on your radar if you start from this way or start from this way, and less disappointing makes, because that pattern fabric match-up type thing is just, it's hard enough to navigate, right? So let's try and boil this down in this video topic today a little bit more, because you should be confident in making these choices, or more confident and more confident every time that you do it. The pattern first approach. So I think this is probably where we start, is you pick a pattern when you start sewing and you think, I'm going to make that, and then you go and try and find a fabric that matches, right? You look on the back of the envelope, you look at all the fabric suggestions, and they all sound like another language, and you pick something that you like, and then the problem is that when we have a style in mind and with this pattern, I find that we have a preconceived idea of what that will look and feel, and how that garment's going to move on us already when we see the style. And then very often trying to find a fabric that matches that is near impossible as a beginner, because the fabric knowledge gap is huge, right? You don't know what all the names are, you don't know what drape is, you don't know what the fabric type is versus fiber type, and weights, and all of that is a mystery. And so there's often big clashes, I find, from there. But helpful things include fabric swatches and all these things for you. So this, when the style just yells at you, so to say, you're like, I need that style. You need to find the right fabric that matches what the idea of how it's going to fit and feel and flow on your body, what that is with the fabric. And that'll make more sense when we go to the next one and talk about the fabric. So very often it doesn't match up. A really good example of this is when I made my designer robe course for Vintage Sewing School, and I was doing lots of different designs. And one of them was going to be a glam robe, and I wanted it to be glamorous, luxurious, and brocades and florals, and the pattern, and drapey, and that glam feel, right? That was what I wanted. And I had my style, my pattern that I made for it. And then I went about finding a fabric to try and match it. And I got way too distracted by the print that I thought I loved for it. I could see it. I was like, that print is beautiful. But sort of got a bit carried away with that. And when I got it, of course, I knew what it was going to be like. In my mind, I knew what this brocade was going to feel like. But I still got it anyway. And when I got it and I made it up, and and it's I just always still left feeling, it looks fine, right? But I was still left feeling a little disappointed, because it didn't fit the vision that I had, right? Because it's quite, it can be very difficult to find that exact fabric that fits that vision, because the brocade that I had, whilst the print and the color is perfect, the drape is not right. I really should have found something more drapey to fit the feel of what I wanted. It looks the part, as in the print, the color, but the feel of it was not what I envisioned. And so there's always just that little bit of disappointment from there. And so you probably find the same thing, right? It just doesn't feel the way that you thought it would when you got to the end. I think that's the biggest issue that we find when we start with our pattern first, in trying to meet that expectation we have in our mind. One that does work out, an example is my yellow Heidi dress. So here I had this pattern, this beautiful square neckline, square little pockets to match. I had this designed and styled, and then I went out to find a fabric, but I stuck to what I knew. I needed something structured. I wanted that sort of structured look, a nice texture to the fabric, and I did find the right fabric that filled that spot. So there's examples. It can work and sometimes it doesn't, but giving you examples of how it might flow and like what it looks like when you consider all the factors of fabric, which isn't, I know it's a whole can of worms, and we will talk more about that at other videos about fabric, but hopefully that helps you give an idea. On the other flip side, when you have fabric first and you pick it up and you're just like, because it is screaming at you to make me, right? This happens when, I don't know if anyone else is like this, but might have a stash of fabric, say, some of us, that, you know, you peruse through, right? One of my favorite things to do is go through the fabrics, and I'm like, oh yes, look at this. And the fabric really speaks to you, right? And then you just want to make something out of that. And then you find a style, a pattern, a design that suits that fabric. And so this can cause issues because it's in the opposite way. You find the fabric and you're like, this is great, I love it, but it's how, like, I think the hardest part is you don't end up with the wrong pattern, so to say. It's that you can't find a pattern that suits like it, right? You're just sort of looking and looking and you're like, and then you end up getting something and maybe it wasn't quite right, because obviously as you're a beginner, you're learning all the things that go into those factors. So it can be more useful though sometimes in meeting your expectation as a beginner, because with the fabric, right, you can like try it on, right? You're like, ooh, you drape it on your body, you like do these ones, you can literally see how it will feel on yourself and how it will flow and perform. And I feel like as beginners, often it's not that it turns out better or worse, it's that we feel better about our makes because it's less disappointing in a way. It's not meeting our expectations that we had in our mind, because the bigger unknown is the fabric rather than the design or style, I think. Sometimes, and sometimes not. So it can be easier for a beginner because you can literally kind of put it on your body and get that feeling, right? Or this fabric, right? You can see it's going to be floaty, drapey, soft, and so you pick a design that has things like that with it. Whereas if I was going with this fabric and it's speaking to me, is obviously a completely different design and would, like, I get a different feel when I look at this. I'm like, you know what speaks to me like this? Like a big circle skirt or like a shift dress, like structured shift dress or something, right? Like those are the types of things. Whereas this, I'm like, something like drapes on it, like, yeah, floatiness, like you want like fluttery sleeves even or something, like, and you sort of design from there. And then you go about obviously trying to find a pattern that suits your design. An example when this worked, I had my red linen that was like, I knew I like loved this. I had it up and I was like, you know what? This is perfect for a half circle skirt. And that's what really spoke to me. And obviously it worked amazingly because I knew I wanted that floatiness with it that linen brings, and it worked perfectly because I already had that feeling of that fabric. So a time when I had the fabric and didn't get the right pattern, I don't actually have any examples for you to show you because I suppose that happened long ago, but is often when, you know, you choose a fabric and you're like, I love this, but you just pick a design that doesn't work with it. An example could be like, though this design here could work really well for this one to be nice and floaty, whereas you think of this one, I would question it because even the structure of the fabric's different, right? But the size of the prints on this large print, I think could get quite lost. This has seams down the panel seams, down the skirt and the bodice, and a large print just kind of gets cut up and lost in all of those seams and panels, right? So not even against the drape, but the patterns can, like, you know, and you make it and you're like, oh, it doesn't really look good in that pattern, or like, oh, I thought it was going to drape more or not. That usually doesn't happen because you already know the drape of the fabric before you pick your pattern, right? So with my example earlier, had I had that pink brocade first and I picked a pattern from there, even if I picked it the same pattern and when I'm going to make a robe out of it, my expectation would have been met because I had already, you know, draped that fabric over me and I knew how it was going to fall. So it would have met my expectation and I wouldn't have been disappointed. Or I would have started with a different fabric, right? Flowy fabric, and then picked what suited that fabric better. Maybe for that pink brocade, I would have picked some other design. Like I could really see, and I kind of wish that I'd made maybe a beautiful, like sort of like fitted bodice with maybe an A-line skirt out of it. Yeah, it's forever wishing I maybe made that out of that fabric instead. But I went the wrong way around choosing that particular one. So my process is to use both, of course, and you probably will too. So it's not that there is one right way. It's more about knowing what to expect when you have each of them. That way that pattern fabric will combine better and get you a better result for what you were hoping for. So I like to start with a pattern when you really have that design that just is like, oh, you have that image in your head, like my square necked Heidi Ra. I knew I wanted to make that, so I made the pattern, made the little matching pockets for it. I was like, this is brilliant, because I knew that design. Like the design was yelling at me to make it. And then I just had to think about what fabric would suit that image I had for it, right? I knew what it looked like in my head. So, okay, it is a structured fabric, a bit thicker, maybe like a plain block color is what I wanted, in a mustard. And then I went out and found that fabric, and luckily I was able to find it. But I definitely didn't start with that yellow plain fabric and think, I'll do some design out of it, right? So that can work. And equally, when you have your fabric, use that to your advantage. Drape it on your body. Get a real good think about what it looks like, right? What could you see that being? Could you see yourself wearing a top in that print? Or could you see yourself with a bottom or a dress? Or is a dress too much, right, of that print or block color, and you want to break it up? Really think about the fabric and what it would make, and then try and find a pattern that is suitable for that feel that you have. So with more experience, you can do the Franken patterning that we just so recently talked about, and, you know, combining different style elements of patterns together to create what you want. So you don't have to find that perfect pattern that exists or doesn't exist. You can make it yourself, right? And so that process becomes easier and easier the more that you just keep on your sewing journey, and the more skills that you have, you're able to, you know, create the designs and patterns you want and know how fabric will drape and fall, and you know all the names. It becomes easier, and there is no one right way. It's more about what suits your personality, which way you like to work. Some people are only going to buy a pattern and then find fabric for it. Other people maybe only get a fabric first and then find designs, or I think most of us maybe do both. But it depends on maybe what mood we're in, right? So don't let your fabric stash stay there unsewn. And don't let your pattern stash stay there unsewn either. Think about using them and starting. You can start from either vantage point. And that's what I want you to really be encouraged to do, and know more how to maybe tackle that problem as it comes up for you. There is no right or wrong way. It mostly comes down to your skill, the inspiration you have, and just your personality, where you want to start. I'd love to hear in the comments down below, what are your fabric struggles or your fabric struggles? I'm going to be making some more videos really around fabric coming up next year. So I would love to hear all your problems, issues, complaints, whatever it is that you like, videos you would love me to make around fabric, because I know fabric choice is so hard, and let's try and do that. So leave those comments below, and I'll be coming up with some new videos very soon on that. Until next time, my sewing friends. Happy sewing. Bye.